The Kamala brand is turning toxic. Battleground Democrats who are locked in tight Senate races are just chucking Harris under the bus and bragging about their ties to former President Trump. Check out these ads they've been running.
Casey bucked Biden to protect fracking, and he sided with Trump to end NAFTA and put tariffs on China.
Tammy Baldwin got President Trump to sign her Made in America bill.
And then she got President Biden to make it permanent.
I wrote a law signed by President Trump forcing drug companies to show their actual prices.
Adding more insult to injury for Kamala's sputtering campaign, her staffers are freaking out over Michigan and that the blue wall's cracking. They're also seeing signs that North Carolina's slipping. But have no fear, Harold. The Democrats' human magic 8-ball himself, James Carville, thinks Kamala has it in the bag.
I think that Harris is going to win. Let me just say that out front. And I'm doubling down on that prediction, but could be wrong.
Could be wrong. So, Judge Jeanine, when you see these Democrats in these competitive states cozy up to Trump like that, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that their internal polling tells them a couple of things. Number one, that Trump is strong in their states. And number two, that they're going to stay away from Kamala. Now, the amazing thing is that these three governors, you're talking about Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Tammy Baldwin, Bob Casey, and Slotkin. They're not all governors, a couple of senators in there. They actually voted to impeach Trump. And yet, right now, they're seeing how the wave is going toward Trump. You know, it's that much more damning. They're not only embracing Trump. I mean, she could have said, Slotkin could have said, you know, I drafted a bill that was signed into law. But she added, by President Trump. She's wrapping herself around Trump, siding with President Trump, Tammy Baldwin says. So what you've got is this blue wall disintegrating. And then when they sit down, the three governors like Shapiro, and Martha Raddatz says, why are they doing this? What is happening to the blue wall? And they're all saying, people are craving leaders. This is Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Leaders who know how to get stuff done. And I can't help but think that, you know, the hurricane helped Trump. You know, he went there, he didn't cause a commotion. He's raising money for the people in North Carolina. He's going to carry North Carolina.
You know how much I love anecdotal evidence, Dana. Isn't this great anecdotal evidence that you don't even need to look at the polls? It tells you something.
I don't think, oh, you mean the ads?
Yeah, these ads.
I don't even think that's anecdotal. I mean, that's obvious. That's just a fact that they have a problem and they're trying to fix it. But here's the real problem that they have. Trump is either an unstable threat to democracy, or he's somebody that the independents can work with. Mm-hmm. It can't be both. So you can't have a closing argument that confuses people who, to the extent that there are undecideds left, are going to make up their minds going in. Like, that doesn't give them something to work with. Plus, they keep saying that they don't really know him enough. Then you have some Democrats now who are saying that they have buyer's remorse on Kamala Harris because you had a weakened Scranton Joe. But is a dangerous California liberal worse for these battleground states? Maybe. Maybe they didn't have a choice. And I think Nancy Pelosi would say that they didn't have a choice. They would have loved to have like a mini primary. That didn't work out. But the fact they have buyer's remorse 14 days before an election, not good.
Not good.
Not good.
Greg?
Yes.
Do you think it's kind of disgusting how these politicians will just do and say anything at the last second to stay alive?
You know, the only thing Kamala has in the bag is a bottle of Pinot Grigio. That's all I'm going to say. No, you know, last week on my show, we did a story on a drug that makes the skin of mice transparent. Why?
Oh.
Why would you do that? Because that way you can see what's wrong with the body without having to cut it open.
Oh.
And that is progress. It's called transparency. Why don't we have that mentality here? You know, if we had that mentality in the election system, make it transparent, then we don't have to cut it open after the election. The race is over, but the integrity of the election is still in question. I'm extremely confused by the polls. Right? They say, everybody says, oh, here, look at these polls, but the internal polls are different. And it's like, okay, if the internal polls are better, why don't we look at the internal polls? Screw the other polls. It's like a doctor giving you a diagnosis and then a different one for the hospital. Why is he doing that? Is it because so he can get you on an experimental drug that has not been tested and now I can't cross my legs for a month? That is wrong. But I think that there's been a huge new demand placed on the voter in terms of vigilance about the election. But it's also, we have to be extra vigilant about public transportation, our streets at night, what your kids are being taught in schools. You have to be vigilant about who's coming into your country, what you're being fed, what drugs you're using, legal or otherwise. I think we're exhausted by the constant vigilance. There's a opportunity cost there that you got to pay attention to everything. And I think that maybe Kamala's looks exhausted, but we're exhausted.
Yeah.
We're tired of having to continue to watch out for everything.
We pay taxes, so they watch out for everything.
Exactly.
Harold Ford Jr., bring it home.
So Thomas Jefferson and John Adams ran against each other a long time ago. It was a very, very contested race. In fact, it went to the Congress for it to be decided. And the guy who ultimately influenced Congress and how it should be decided, there was a great play that so many people went to see called Hamilton. It was Alexander Hamilton who didn't like either of the candidates, but eventually sided with Jefferson. We have a history in the country of close elections. We have a history of people wanting to hear more, to your point, Greg, about transparency and hearing the issues. Back then, people wanted to make sure we stayed away from the king and we didn't create a king in our own country. We still have semblance and, for that matter, consistency around that today. This is not a knock at President Trump at all. It's just how we want our country run. We don't want big government or government that is overbearing, which leads me to the point. I like when candidates in the race on bipartisanship. I like it when they talk about perhaps the possibility of healing, perhaps the possibility of a functioning government. Elisa Slotkin's ahead in Michigan. She's probably going to win. I know Mike Rogers. I served with him, but she's probably going to win that race. And she's saying, I think the voters, if you elect me, I can work with Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. I think Tammy Baldwin in so many ways is doing the same thing. Finally, trade, China, energy production, targeted tax cuts. I think there are going to be limited things that Democrats and Republicans can work on together. And I hear in those ads that those candidates who are in tough races are saying to voters, Democrat, Republican alike, if I'm fortunate, if I'm privileged to be elected again, this is what I'm going to do. As an American, I got to tell you, I like that.
Or it's transactional.
There's nothing wrong with that either. That's called government working.
Well, I think we can
Long
all
as it's not
agree
money changing
that
hands.
Hamilton was overrated.
Yes.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.